At 38 below zero, shutting this locomotive down for one night can turn 4,000 horsepower into a dead block of iron that takes weeks to replace. So tonight, like every winter night on the Alaska Railroad, the diesel behind the cab will not stop running. Not at the sidings, not at the crew change, not once. This is a train driver's night in Alaska at 38 below, and the cold out there is not hunting the two men in that cab. It is hunting something that runs the full length of their train, and if it wins, they find out in the worst place this railroad has, on a long grade in the dark, 4 in the afternoon and the sun is already gone. At this latitude, the shift starts in full darkness outside the cab, walking the train with flashlights, checking brake shoes and the hoses between cars. At 38 below, rubber air hoses stiffen into something closer to plastic pipe. Plastic cracks from a tap that would leave no mark in July. Steel pulls heat through a glove so fast that barehanded work comes in 1-minute bursts, and snow stops crunching and starts squeaking like styrofoam. Whatever the yard lights miss right now gets found later, out on the line, in the dark, with a flashlight. Remember that. And through all of it, the locomotive sits there running, burning fuel while going nowhere, which looks like waste until you know what a shutdown does up here. The engine is an EMD 16-cylinder diesel, and each cylinder displaces 710 cubic inches, more swept volume in one hole than in your whole pickup. And here is the part most people outside the industry never hear. That engine is not cooled with antifreeze. It runs on treated water because glycol leaking past a seal into the lube oil wrecks the bearings. Straight water starts a countdown the moment the engine dies in deep cold. Water in the lines freezes and expands with a force the metal cannot argue with. Cracked pipes, split radiators, ruined pumps. Railroaders call it freezing down a unit, and one night is enough. Add batteries that lose much of their cranking power in the cold, and restarting a cold-soaked diesel this size is a gamble nobody takes. But the number that settles it is 470. That is how many mainline miles this railroad runs. Seward to Anchorage to Fairbanks, and not one of those miles touches the rest of the North American rail network. Every locomotive and freight car got here on a rail barge out of Seattle, offloaded at Whittier on a run scheduled about once a week and rescheduled by the Gulf of Alaska whenever it likes. So a frozen locomotive is not a phone call and a replacement by Friday. It is weeks on a railroad that cannot spare a unit. Idle fuel is the cheapest insurance ever bought. The train pulls out around 7, headlights carving 2 rails out of a black wall of spruce, and the first thread of the night walks onto the track on 4 legs. In deep snow winters, moose use the rail bed because it beats wallowing chest deep in powder, and they do not yield to headlights. In the winter of 1989 to 90, this railroad killed 749 of them. Tonight, this one clears the ballast in time, and the crew could not have done much either way, which raises what nobody thinks to ask. What actually happens when thousands of tons of rolling steel need to stop? The answer is one airline running from the locomotive to the last car, joined car to car by those same rubber hoses, charged to about 90 pounds per square inch by the compressor. The logic runs backwards. As long as the line holds full pressure, the brakes stay released. To brake, the engineer lets air out. The pressure drop is the command, and every car obeys at once. George Westinghouse built it that way in the 1870s for one brutal reason. If a train breaks in two, the hoses tear apart, the air escapes, and both halves stop themselves with nobody giving an order. Failure means stopping, not running away. If you have ever had a glad hand pop loose and watched the spring brakes lock up on their own, you already know this system. Same idea, 30 times the tonnage. If you respect people who keep heavy machinery alive in places that are actively trying to kill it, subscribe, because that is the only kind of story this channel tells. That design has been the standard for 150 years, and it has one soft spot. The compressor breathes outside air, and all air carries moisture. The dryer strips most of it, and at 38 below, the rest freezes as frost inside valves and passages. The hoses harden and seep at the fittings, and gaskets that sealed at 20 above stop sealing. Then the sneaky one. A brake command travels the line as a pressure wave, head to tail, and cold stretches the delay. None of this fails loud. The system quietly stops being predictable, and for a man taking tonnage downhill, that is worse than a broken part. A broken part you can see. 1 in the morning holding a siding to meet an opposing train, because most of this railroad is single track, and a second clock starts running against them. Federal law caps a train crew at 12 consecutive hours on duty, and when that number comes up, they stop the train and quit, wherever they are. Railroaders call it going dead on the law. Every minute here is gone from the hours they need to reach Fairbanks. And there are no bunks in a road locomotive, just a reclining seat, a folded parka, boots still on. Every few minutes, the compressor slams on with a bang that rings the cab like a drum, and there is a bitter joke in it. The machine wrecking their rest is the machine fighting the leaks, and an experienced engineer counts those cycles half asleep, because the shorter the gaps get, the worse the line is holding. So if one man can physically run this locomotive, why does the railroad pay for two? 4:30 in the morning answers it. The coldest hour of the night is also the low point of the human body. Reaction slow, attention drifting, and these two have been on duty since 4. Less than an hour ahead waits the grade, and the conductor sees the brake pipe gauge sitting in the low 80s instead of 90, easing lower. Nothing bangs. A number is simply wrong. Somewhere back in the dark, a frozen fitting is bleeding air faster than the compressor can replace it. Standing still gave the cold its opening. The engineer stops on flat track while the pressure can still do that cleanly, on his terms, and not the cold's. They cannot take the grade with a soft line. Grades here reach 3%, steep enough that a heavy train out of Seward needs 6 locomotives where 2 do from Whittier. They cannot sit long because a stalled train plugs the only track there is. And help is a relief crew driving out from the nearest terminal, hours away, if a road even reaches the spot. This is what the cold was hunting since 4 in the afternoon. Not the men, the margin. The quiet certainty that lets an engineer say my train stops right here. And the fix is not heroic, it is procedural. The conductor climbs down and walks the train on iced ballast with a flashlight, the exact search those yard lights were supposed to spare him, because frost blooms on a leak and gives it away. He finds the fitting, heats it, restores the seal, drains the condensate, and the compressor pulls the line back up. Then a full brake test. Set them, walk the train, confirm every shoe applied and released. Then the dispatcher and permission to move. And this is why 2 men sit in that cab. The alerter already watches the engineer, demanding a response every half minute or so, and it stops the train itself if he goes silent. But it cannot walk a train at 38 below, and it cannot look at a tired man's plan and say, check that again. One exhausted man makes his mistakes in silence. 2 exhausted men check each other. They take the grade slower than any summer rule requires, riding the margin instead of the clock, because lost time can be made back and a runaway cannot. From here, the night snaps into shape. Every rule here has a wreck behind it. The diesel idles for weeks because a frozen unit strands a railroad. Brakes get tested before the hill because doubt at the top is too late. 2 men share the cab because the coldest hour of the night is the slowest hour of the human brain. 7:30, and the yard lights of the terminal rise out of a late gray dawn. The train arrives late and intact, brakes in order, engine alive, crew nearly out of legal hours. They hand the unit over and leave it running. That drone has not stopped in weeks. We picture cold as something that attacks bodies, and skin does freeze fast out there. But the real fight ran on another front. The cold went after systems, freezing moisture in the pipes, stiffening the rubber, shaving the margin while everyone watched the thermometer. For the 2 men climbing down stiff, none of it was a story. Just a normal winter shift on the only rails feeding interior Alaska. There is no backup railroad. There never was one.